There comes a quiet moment when the threads that once tied two souls together begin to loosen without any visible cause. You may notice it in the pauses during conversation, the unspoken silences that linger longer than they once did, or in the subtle distance that grows in gestures and attention. It is not dramatic, and it is not loud. Rather, it is a gentle yet persistent signal from life that certain connections are not aligned with the path you are meant to walk. These small withdrawals are often accompanied by a strange clarity, an almost intuitive sense that something within the dynamic is shifting. The avoidant nature of the other person becomes more apparent, not through confrontation but through absence. This absence is not merely physical, it is emotional, psychological, and even spiritual. It is as though an invisible hand is guiding you to recognize that your energy and theirs are moving in different rhythms, and that alignment is not possible at this moment. In this space, the soul begins to sense the wisdom of stepping back, even when the mind is filled with questions and the heart longs for closeness. It is a delicate invitation to observe without judgment, to witness the patterns without trying to force them into harmony, and to accept that some separations are a form of protection, both for the self and for the integrity of one's personal journey. As this subtle withdrawal continues, you might find your awareness sharpened, noticing the small signs you previously overlooked. Perhaps it is the hesitation in their words, the avoidance of deep conversations, or the inconsistency in their presence. These are not failures or rejections, but markers indicating that the connection does not serve your deeper needs at this time. The universe, through its quiet guidance, creates circumstances that allow you to experience life with clarity rather than confusion. It encourages a form of introspection, asking you to turn your attention inward and reflect on what you truly require from relationships. In doing so, you are gently nudged towards self-alignment, realizing that your sense of security, emotional availability, and authenticity cannot be fully expressed with someone whose nature is to remain distant. This process, while subtle, is immensely instructive. It teaches patience, discernment, and the value of observing without forcing outcomes. You begin to understand that connection is not simply about desire or attraction, but about resonance, an alignment of presence, attention, and openness that cannot be manufactured when fundamental differences exist. The beauty of this quiet withdrawal is that it is neither punitive nor judgmental. It is protective and illuminating. Life, in its wisdom, often removes what is not conducive to your growth before the mind fully comprehends the reason. The subtle pullback of an avoidant presence allows you to conserve emotional energy, preserve your sense of self, and prevent entanglement in patterns that may later cause dissonance or regret. It also creates a sacred space for reflection, offering you the chance to explore your own responses to absence, your capacity for patience, and your ability to hold space for someone without losing yourself. In this process, the inner world becomes a place of observation and insight rather than anxiety. You may feel a longing or sadness, but it is accompanied by understanding, a recognition that some distances are necessary for your own evolution. Over time, the withdrawal reveals itself as a form of guidance, a quiet hand steering you toward relationships and experiences that are more congruent with your inner truth and emotional well-being. It is a testament to the subtle ways in which life encourages harmony, balance, and the courage to honor one's own needs above the compulsion to fix or cling. When separation begins to gently assert itself, one of the first changes you may notice is an awakening within, a heightened sense of inner awareness that cannot be ignored. Suddenly, you find yourself noticing the subtle patterns in your thoughts, the recurrent emotions that arise seemingly without reason, and the small but persistent impulses guiding your decisions. It is as if the mind and heart are being compelled to observe themselves more carefully, to notice where energy is being spent and where it is being drained. This inner illumination reveals not only your responses to another person's avoidant tendencies, but also your own unresolved fears and attachments. You begin to see the ways in which you may have tolerated inconsistency, excused absence, or suppressed your own needs to maintain connection. The awareness is not accusatory. It does not demand blame, but instead acts as a mirror reflecting the unexamined elements of your emotional world. In this quiet reflection, the nuances of self-respect, boundaries, and authenticity come to the forefront. You begin to comprehend that emotional intimacy is not solely about closeness, but also about mutual presence and attentiveness, and that the absence of these elements is a signal for deep introspection rather than a failure of the self. As this heightened awareness grows, you may notice a profound sensitivity to the subtle energies around you, the rhythms of interaction that once seemed insignificant but now speak volumes. Every pause, every slight hesitation, every unspoken tension becomes a lesson in perception. You begin to sense not only the patterns of the other person but also the underlying motives within yourself. The desires for approval, the fear of abandonment, and the longing for reciprocated understanding. These insights are gifts, albeit sometimes uncomfortable, for they illuminate areas that have long remained in shadow. The discomfort that accompanies such revelations is not a punishment. It is an invitation to examine the self without judgment, to confront the ways in which your own unconscious patterns interact with another's avoidant tendencies. In this process, self-awareness becomes a compass, guiding you toward choices that honor your emotional needs and personal integrity. You come to recognize that true intimacy begins within, and that clarity about one's own mind and heart is essential before genuine connection with another can occur. This period of inner awakening ultimately fosters a deeper sense of self-possession. You begin to cultivate a voice that is independent, clear, and attuned to the nuances of your own experience. You notice when you are overextending, when you are suppressing truth for the sake of harmony, and when your own needs are being compromised. With every reflection, every recognition, the mind sharpens and the heart steadies. The awareness gained during this time becomes a guide, not only in understanding the avoidant dynamics of others, but in navigating all future relationships with clarity and wisdom. What might have initially felt like loss or withdrawal transforms into insight and empowerment, revealing that the real work is not in altering another person's tendencies, but in cultivating a conscious presence within oneself, grounded in observation, discernment, and the quiet but profound recognition of what truly aligns with the soul. There is a peculiar tension that arises when one senses the subtle guidance of life steering them away from an avoidant presence. It often manifests as emotional discomfort, a persistent undercurrent of unease, restlessness, or dissatisfaction that cannot be easily explained. This discomfort is not meant to punish or alarm, but to serve as a compass, quietly signaling that the current relational path is misaligned with deeper needs. The sensation may emerge as a lingering sense of frustration, moments of inexplicable sadness, or an internal tug urging reflection on the dynamics at play. Such feelings, while unsettling, act as indicators that something within the interaction is out of harmony with one's inner truth. When we pay attention to these emotional signals rather than suppressing them, we uncover a form of guidance that is both subtle and profound. The discomfort becomes a teacher, illuminating the ways in which a connection with an avoidant individual may be inhibiting growth, fostering insecurity, or creating a mismatch in emotional reciprocity. In this sense, the uneasy emotions are not obstacles but directional markers, pointing toward the necessity of reconsideration, self-protection, and discernment in matters of intimacy and emotional investment. As the discomfort persists, it often highlights recurring patterns that may have gone unnoticed in the past. You begin to perceive the rhythm of inconsistency, the oscillation between closeness and withdrawal, and the emotional toll that accompanies such dynamics. This awareness is not designed to create guilt or resentment, but to enhance perception, allowing a more honest understanding of the interplay between desire, expectation, and reality. It illuminates the boundaries of personal capacity and the importance of recognizing when emotional needs are not being met. In observing these subtle cues, one can differentiate between temporary challenges and deeper incompatibilities. The compass of emotional discomfort guides the conscious mind to pay attention to the signals that the heart and psyche have long been voicing, but that rational thought often overlooked. It encourages reflection on what is sustainable, healthy, and aligned with one's evolving sense of self, emphasizing that emotional pain can be transformative when approached with mindfulness and introspection rather than avoidance or denial. Ultimately, learning to trust discomfort as a guide cultivates emotional resilience and self-awareness. It teaches that not all relationships are meant to provide comfort, and that the presence of tension can illuminate essential truths about alignment, values, and personal growth. By observing how emotional unease manifests in response to avoidant tendencies, one becomes attuned to subtle forces shaping relational dynamics. These lessons extend beyond a single connection, fostering a deeper capacity to recognize patterns that no longer serve one's well-being and to make conscious choices that honor inner truth. Over time, the guidance offered by discomfort reveals itself as a profound tool for discernment, enabling one to navigate relationships with clarity, integrity, and a sense of alignment that is both protective and empowering. Emotional discomfort, once understood as a compass, becomes a source of insight, encouraging the courage to step away when necessary and the wisdom to seek connections that resonate with the soul's true needs. When one is in the orbit of an avoidant presence, there is often a peculiar recurrence of experiences, moments, and memories that seem to return like echoes of a distant pattern. These cycles of repetition are rarely random. They emerge as a mirror, reflecting unresolved dynamics, lingering attachments, and unacknowledged emotions. One may find themselves revisiting the same scenarios, feeling the same frustrations, or recalling the same disappointments repeatedly, as though the psyche is compelled to observe and integrate the lessons embedded within these interactions. This repetition is not meant to torment, but to illuminate, encouraging reflection on why certain dynamics persist and what personal growth remains unfinished. Each recurrence offers the opportunity to witness the interplay between one's desires and the avoidant tendencies of another, highlighting areas where compromise has been excessive or boundaries have been blurred. In observing these cycles, one begins to recognize the unconscious patterns that shape emotional engagement, revealing the subtle ways in which attachment, expectation, and hope have guided choices and responses. The repetition, while sometimes exhausting, is a form of education, teaching the mind and heart to distinguish between what nourishes the self and what drains it, to see the difference between genuine connection and conditional presence, and to approach relationships with greater clarity and intention. Within these cycles, reflection becomes an essential tool. It is through contemplation of repeated experiences that insight emerges, uncovering the mechanisms by which one may unconsciously perpetuate connection with someone whose nature is avoidant. Reflection invites a pause, a moment of stillness in which one can examine motivations, patterns of thought, and emotional triggers. In doing so, a profound understanding arises. The repetition is not solely the consequence of the other's behavior, but a dynamic co-created between two consciousnesses. One sees the ways in which hope, longing, or fear may have influenced actions, and the patterns that have kept one tethered to a relationship that does not fully serve personal growth. The reflective process encourages mindfulness, offering clarity on which aspects of the interaction are within one's power to influence and which are beyond control. It becomes a subtle form of liberation, teaching that observation and insight are more transformative than insistence or striving, and that detachment does not signify defeat, but conscious alignment with inner truth. Over time, cycles of repetition and reflection reveal themselves as agents of maturation, fostering emotional wisdom and self-responsibility. They create space to recognize recurring themes, to understand the interplay of avoidance and attachment, and to integrate lessons that might otherwise remain dormant. By consciously engaging with these cycles, one develops a heightened sense of discernment, recognizing when patterns are constructive and when they signal the necessity of stepping back. These lessons extend beyond the immediate relationship, shaping the capacity to navigate all interactions with greater awareness, patience, and intentionality. In essence, repetition and reflection act as guides, encouraging one to observe, learn, and evolve, ensuring that future connections are grounded in authenticity, reciprocity, and the alignment of mutual presence. What initially feels like a cycle of frustration transforms into a profound journey of self-knowledge, revealing that growth often comes not through avoidance of discomfort, but through the conscious engagement with its recurring lessons. There is a subtle orchestration in life, an intricate pattern of circumstances that often guides us away from what is not aligned with our growth. When the path of a relationship intersects with an avoidant presence, one may begin to notice events and situations that seem coincidental, yet consistently create distance. Missed appointments, unforeseen obligations, or shifts in priorities appear as small obstacles, almost as if life itself is constructing gentle boundaries. These unseen forces are not meant to punish, but to steer attention toward alignment, revealing that sometimes separation is a necessary part of personal evolution. The psyche perceives these occurrences as disruptions, yet in reflection, it becomes clear that they serve as protective mechanisms. The world conspires in subtle and mysterious ways to prevent entanglement with patterns that may hinder self-discovery, emotional stability, or spiritual alignment. Awareness of this invisible guidance requires a quiet mind and a sensitive heart, capable of recognizing the lessons hidden within the mundane events of daily life. In this process, one begins to see the interconnectedness of circumstance, choice, and the deeper currents that shape experience, understanding that what appears as chance is often an invitation to move in a direction that is more congruent with inner truth and authentic development. These unseen forces also manifest in the timing of interactions, the availability of attention, and the unfolding of opportunities. Encounters may be delayed, communication may falter, and plans may dissolve, each instance echoing the subtle insistence of life that alignment is not present. It is a form of guidance that transcends conscious intention, asking one to observe rather than to control. The separation that arises is rarely immediate or absolute. Instead, it is gradual, punctuated by small signs that call for attentiveness and discernment. By reflecting on these patterns, the individual begins to appreciate the wisdom inherent in detachment, recognizing that the barriers placed by circumstance are not arbitrary but protective. They shield from prolonged exposure to a dynamic that does not serve mutual growth and encourage the cultivation of patience, awareness, and respect for the rhythms of life beyond personal desire. Such insight fosters acceptance, a comprehension that the flow of events often possesses a logic deeper than immediate perception, and that resisting these currents may create unnecessary tension or suffering. Ultimately, recognizing the influence of unseen forces cultivates trust in the larger unfolding of life. Separation, when viewed through this lens, is not a loss but a form of guidance, an encouragement to redirect attention toward growth, self-realization, and relationships that are naturally aligned. The subtle obstacles, the missed encounters, and the quiet disruptions become teachers, reminding that presence and connection are not solely matters of intention, but also of timing, readiness, and resonance. Through this perspective, one learns to honor both the limits and the possibilities inherent in relational dynamics, understanding that stepping away from misaligned connections creates space for experiences that are more harmonious, nurturing, and reflective of one's inner truth. The unseen forces, once perceived with clarity, reveal themselves not as barriers but as guides, shaping a path toward emotional integrity, authentic connection, and the deeper understanding that life's wisdom often manifests in ways beyond conscious control. In the quiet space that emerges when life guides one away from an avoidant presence, a new awareness often rises, the awakening of self-priority. It is not an act of selfishness, but a natural realignment of attention toward the self, toward one's own needs, growth, and well-being. Previously, energy may have been consumed in navigating the inconsistent presence of another, in attempting to maintain a bond that required compromise beyond comfort, or in holding space for someone whose patterns did not fully resonate with one's inner life. With separation, however subtle, attention turns inward, highlighting the importance of nurturing personal development, cultivating emotional resilience, and honoring the rhythms of one's own mind and heart. This emergence is accompanied by a growing recognition that the self cannot be fully realized through the lens of another's avoidance or distance. The focus shifts from external validation to internal coherence, from longing for reciprocity to fostering alignment with one's own values, priorities, and aspirations. In this turning inward, one begins to explore the richness of personal potential, the depth of creative expression, and the capacity for relationships that are mutually attentive and authentically engaging. It is in this space that boundaries gain clarity, self-respect is reinforced, and the understanding arises that emotional energy is most wisely invested where it is received, acknowledged, and mirrored in kind. As self-priority solidifies, the rhythms of daily life are subtly transformed. Decisions become more intentional, guided by awareness of what sustains vitality rather than what demands compromise or induces depletion. Habits, routines, and relationships are recalibrated to support personal growth, health, and fulfillment. There is a recognition that attention, when directed inward, fosters clarity of purpose and cultivates resilience against the anxieties of relational uncertainty. Emotional energy that was once diffused in attempts to coax presence from an avoidant individual is now redirected toward creative endeavors, meaningful connections, and self-discovery. This shift does not erase feelings of loss or longing, but it frames them within a larger perspective, emphasizing growth over attachment and autonomy over dependency. The emergence of self-priority, therefore, acts as both shield and compass, guiding the individual toward experiences that align with deeper truth and authentic fulfillment. Ultimately, the cultivation of self-priority fosters empowerment and emotional integrity. It teaches that authentic presence in one's own life is a prerequisite for meaningful engagement with others, and that attempts to force connection where alignment is absent only compromise growth. In stepping into self-priority, one learns to honor limits, to recognize the value of autonomy, and to seek relationships that resonate with mutual respect and attentiveness. Life, in its subtle guidance, emphasizes that the greatest source of security and fulfillment resides not in another's consistency, but in the conscious attention to one's own inner world. The emergence of self-priority is both a recognition and a practice. It is the acknowledgement that self-care, clarity, and alignment are essential, and it is the active cultivation of habits, choices, and relationships that reflect and reinforce one's own authentic path. Through this lens, separation from an avoidant presence transforms into an opportunity for growth, self-clarity, and the steady development of emotional sovereignty, preparing the individual for connections that are harmonious, reciprocal, and life-affirming. When life guides one away from an avoidant presence, a deeper awareness often emerges, the illumination of shadow patterns within oneself. The shadow, composed of hidden fears, unacknowledged desires, and unresolved wounds, is rarely evident until circumstances provoke reflection. In the dynamics with an avoidant individual, the absence, withdrawal, or emotional distance of the other acts as a mirror, reflecting aspects of the self that have been suppressed or ignored. Suddenly, one becomes conscious of tendencies to overextend, to seek approval, to cling to connection despite discomfort, or to avoid confrontation for the sake of harmony. These patterns, long operating in the unconscious, surface not to create guilt, but to foster understanding. The repeated experiences of unmet emotional needs and unreciprocated attentiveness illuminate the ways in which the psyche has negotiated relationships in alignment with fear rather than authenticity. The withdrawal of the avoidant presence catalyzes this recognition, offering an opportunity to observe one's reactions, motivations, and emotional vulnerabilities with clarity. In witnessing these shadow aspects, one is invited to confront the deeper layers of self, to acknowledge what has been projected onto the other, and to integrate these realizations into conscious understanding. The illumination of shadow patterns is both challenging and liberating, for it reveals the paths where unconscious tendencies may have led to repeated discomfort and simultaneously provides the insight needed to cultivate healthier relational dynamics in the future. As these patterns come into view, there is an opportunity for transformation. Reflection allows one to distinguish between authentic needs and those shaped by fear or past conditioning. The interactions with an avoidant presence highlight the ways in which dependence on external validation, avoidance of vulnerability, or suppression of self-expression may have influenced choices and emotional investment. By observing these patterns without judgment, one learns to recognize triggers, to discern when behaviors are reactive rather than intentional, and to cultivate strategies that promote self-awareness and emotional sovereignty. This process involves embracing discomfort as a teacher, understanding that the mirror of another's avoidance is not a condemnation, but a guide toward conscious evolution. The illumination of shadow patterns encourages a re-evaluation of priorities, habits, and relational expectations, fostering insight into how the psyche navigates intimacy, attachment, and autonomy. In essence, the experiences that initially evoke pain or frustration become the catalysts for profound self-knowledge and growth. Ultimately, this encounter with the shadow nurtures integration and balance. The awareness gained provides a foundation for healthier engagement with oneself and with others, highlighting the importance of self-reflection and personal responsibility in shaping relational dynamics. The process teaches that growth is rarely linear. It often requires patience, introspection, and the courage to confront internal truths previously hidden. By recognizing and integrating these shadow aspects, one develops resilience, emotional maturity, and the capacity to engage in relationships from a place of clarity and authenticity. What initially appeared as separation or loss transforms into a journey of self-discovery, illuminating the depth of the inner world and fostering the ability to navigate life with insight, integrity, and conscious presence. The shadow, once confronted, becomes a guide rather than a burden, allowing the individual to step forward with a renewed sense of self-awareness, readiness for authentic connection, and the wisdom to honor both personal boundaries and emotional truth. The distance created when life guides one away from an avoidant presence is not empty or meaningless. It carries a profound purpose, the preparation for relationships